Madison Ford stood at the altar under a delicate canopy woven with white roses and soft greenery, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the garden. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched the bouquet of peonies, the scent sweet and familiar. The gentle murmur of friends and family blended with the distant tinkling of laughter, but beneath the surface of the joyous occasion, a knot of nerves twisted in her stomach. Today was supposed to be the day she married Adam, the man she dreamed of spending her life with. Adam's absence was nowhere near expected. The guests' eyes flickered nervously toward the entrance, anticipation slowly souring into confusion. Madison's heart pounded louder with each passing minute, the seconds stretching unbearably. She tried to steady her breath, recalling the countless plans and dreams they had shared, their laughter on quiet evenings, the promises whispered under starlit skies. But the silence in the garden grew heavier, and the whispered questions from the guests began to form a chorus of doubt. Then, the truth settled like a shadow: Adam wasn't coming. The realization crushed her chest, leaving her numb beneath the pristine silk of her gown. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some eyes avoided hers, others gleamed with unspoken judgments. In that moment, Madison felt exposed and abandoned, not just by Adam but by the world that expected her to understand, forgive, and move on without a hint of bitterness. Across the garden, a cool breeze swept through the olive branches, catching the hem of Madison's dress. She blinked back tears, whispering to herself that this wasn't the end, that she would find the strength to rise beyond the heartbreak left at the altar. In the weeks that followed the wedding that never was, Madison Ford found herself enveloped in a quiet storm. The garden where she had stood hopeful and radiant became a distant memory, replaced by the chilly reality of a home filled with empty spaces and unanswered questions. She moved through her days with a fragile grace, concealing the ache beneath practiced smiles. Yet, despite her efforts to carry on, the whispers lingered around her like shadows refusing to fade. At work, the familiar faces of colleagues bore subtle expressions, some sympathetic, others judgmental. "Were you sure about Adam?" one whispered, barely concealing the skepticism. Another's glance held a trace of pity, as though Madison's abandonment was a stain she'd somehow earned. It wasn't outright cruelty, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. They questioned her, doubted her, even as they offered hollow condolences. Madison resented the quiet judgment more than the absence of Adam. She had fallen hard, trusting him with her dreams and heart. Her self-esteem buckled under the weight of the public abandonment, yet she refused to succumb. Nights were the hardest, when the house grew silent and memories crept in with sharp clarity. She would sit by her bedroom window, staring out at the neighborhood she had always loved, fighting the tight grip of loneliness. Friends who once promised unwavering support began to drift away, their visits becoming less frequent and their messages unanswered. The unspoken belief that something had gone wrong with Madison, that she had failed to keep Adam by her side, hung heavy in the air. It was an isolation born not from malice but from discomfort, as if her pain unsettled their carefully balanced lives. Still, Madison nurtured a quiet determination. She took up painting again, the colors on canvas pouring out emotions too complex for words. Each stroke was a small act of defiance against the narrative that she was broken, disposable, or unworthy of love. Slowly, she rebuilt a life on her terms, learning to cherish herself beyond the bruises left behind. Nearly 3 years passed, and Madison's heart grew stronger, though the occasional pang of betrayal still flared unexpectedly. The neighborhood remained the same, familiar and comforting in some ways. She had recently moved into a modest home across the street from a new neighbor, hoping the change would bring new beginnings. The day Adam appeared in the neighborhood was the day the past she thought she had buried came rushing back. It was a casual afternoon. Madison was tending to her small garden when she spotted a moving van unloading boxes in the house directly opposite hers. Her breath caught as she recognized Adam among the movers, his back turned, carrying a box with careful hands. Time seemed to freeze. How could he be here, after all this time? She watched discreetly as a woman's laughter drifted from the house, light and warm, accompanied by the clear, cheerful voice of a child calling out, "Daddy." The word landed heavy in Madison's chest, a sudden, sharp reminder of loss and deception. Her mind raced with questions. How had she not known? What kind of life had he built while she was left to face the ruin of their broken engagement alone? The neighborhood was small enough that news circulated quickly, though nothing official about Adam's life came through. Yet, Madison had no doubt that the secret family she had glimpsed was real. The chasm between the life she'd imagined and the reality in front of her felt vast and unbridgeable. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones, stealing glances when they thought Madison wasn't watching, their eyes flickering with surprise or knowing. Some offered thinly veiled comments. Did you hear about Adam's new family? Quite the surprise. Madison's presence became an unspoken tension, a living question mark amid the quiet cul-de-sac. Despite the sting of being underestimated, judged, and wronged, Madison refused to retreat into despair. The old wounds reopened, but so did a flame of resilience. Her heart was battered, yet full of purpose. She understood now that healing was not about forgetting but about reclaiming her story, step by cautious step. On a cool, late afternoon as she watered her garden, Madison paused, lifting her face to the sky. The setting sun painted the clouds with hues of gold and lavender, and for a moment, the heaviness inside her lightened. She wondered, quietly to herself, if anyone else had ever experienced a betrayal so deep and unexpected, a betrayal wrapped in years of silence and secret lives. Could she find a way to face the truth without losing herself again? The question pulsed gently, an invitation rather than a command. Madison breathed deeply, feeling the pulse of life around her, the wind in the trees, the distant laughter from neighbors' yards, the soft rustle of leaves. This was her world still, flawed and beautiful. She took a small step forward, knowing that the greatest courage lay in embracing the unknown with an open heart. Madison sat on the edge of her couch, the soft afternoon light filtering through lace curtains and settling on the textured fabric. She stared out the window at the modest house across the street where Adam lived now, a life so close that her mind wrestled to comprehend how different their worlds had become. The little girl's laughter echoed faintly in her memory, a sound so pure it tugged harshly at her heart, weaving confusion and an ache that made her throat tighten. Despite the quiet she'd crafted around herself, doubt crept in during the loneliness of early mornings and the stillness of nights. She couldn't shake the questions crowding her mind. Why had Adam left her without a word? What had she missed in the years they dreamed of forever? Was she blind to signs, or was the truth something darker, something unspoken? Her friends had noticed the signs, her unrest, the slide into sleepless nights and distracted days. Yet Madison guarded her heart fiercely, unwilling to unload the fragile threads of her emotions. You need to look after yourself, her closest friend, Elise, said gently over coffee one afternoon. It's time to stop torturing yourself, Maddie. Madison nodded but couldn't quell the restless need to know more, a hunger for answers that gnawed beneath the surface. One evening, curiosity and a cautious resolve drew her to the edge of her property as dusk settled. The street lights flickered on one by one, casting golden pools on sidewalks lined with old oaks. From her vantage point, Madison saw soft shadows flicker through Adam's living room window. She caught sight of the woman, whose identity was still a mystery but whose presence loomed large in Madison's thoughts. The child, small and bright-eyed, called out, "Daddy," again, her voice lilting in the growing darkness. Her breath hitched. The woman smiled in a way that seemed familiar and yet alien, a warmth Madison had never shared with Adam. It was the starkest contrast to the promises he had made to her, the vows left unspoken in an empty garden 3 years ago. Madison's emotions swirled, a tempest of anger, sadness, and a bitter sting of betrayal. To witness this hidden world unfolding silently next door was a cruel twist of fate. The life she'd imagined with Adam had never existed outside her own hopes, while he had quietly woven a new life with someone else. But amid the turmoil, Madison found a strange clarity beginning to form. She realized that her pain need not be a trap. It could be a catalyst, a reason to assert her worth, unhinged from the shadow of Adam's choices. She was more than the woman left at the altar, she was someone who could redefine her story. That night, sleep eluded her as her mind turned over every conversation she and Adam had shared, every touch and promise. Her self-doubt weighed heavily. Had she ever truly known him? Had the man she loved been part of a life she'd never seen? She wondered if Adam had come back to face her once, or if he had simply vanished to protect his secret world. Madison's thoughts spiraled, but amidst the storm, she found a faint thread of resilience. She was standing on the threshold of something unknown, a moment charged with the possibility of truth and hope, even if wrapped in pain. A few days later, her heart racing, Madison decided to confront her fears more directly. During a neighborhood gathering, she approached one of the neighbors known for being chatty, a woman named Clara, who was always well informed about the community's comings and goings. Clara's keen eyes and easy smile often disarmed newcomers and longtime residents alike. "Clara," Madison began carefully, "I don't mean to pry, but I've been curious. What do you know about Adam? Is there more to his story?" Clara hesitated, then nodded slowly, lowering her voice. "I don't want to gossip, but yes, he's got a family. A wife or partner and their little girl. It's been that way for years, or so people say. I'm sorry you had to find out like this." The words landed like a sudden jolt. Madison's stomach twisted, not only because of the betrayal but because somewhere deep down, hearing the confirmation relieved some of the uncertainty that had haunted her. There was no denying it now. Adam had deliberately kept a secret life from her. Their engagement, the plans and promises, they had meant nothing against the existence he'd hidden. In the days that followed, Madison struggled with a storm of emotions. The anger burned hot, the sadness hollow and deep. Yet she refused to let the weight of another's deception crush her entirely. She leaned on the small network of friends who remained and sought solace in quiet things, running her fingers over the textured strokes of her painting, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the steady rhythm of her breath. Still, the proximity of Adam's life gnawed at her. How could someone live so close, so near, and have so completely betrayed trust? The unfairness of it stayed lodged in her chest each time she glimpsed laughter drifting from that house. On a rare night when the neighborhood had fallen silent, Madison sat down at her desk, a pen poised over a blank journal page. She wrote, not to reach Adam but to reach herself, to map the tangled emotions and find a way to begin healing anew. Her words spilled out with raw honesty, her confusion, hurt, and tentative hope. "I am not defined by what he has done, but by how I choose to rise. This story is mine." Though the weight of Adam's secret life seemed overwhelming, Madison's resolve began to crystallize. She was no longer the woman trapped by expectations or rumors. She was a woman learning to stand tall, even when the world around her trembled. As her journal filled page by page, a quiet strength blossomed beneath the surface. She began to imagine a future where her worth was independent of others' choices, a future she was ready to claim on her own terms. Yet the lingering question remained, should she confront Adam with what she had learned, or should she let the past lie in the shadows? The uncertainty threaded through her thoughts, challenging her at every turn. In this delicate balance between pain and empowerment, Madison found an unexpected form of courage. It was not the loud defiance of confrontation but a quiet willingness to protect her heart and seek truth on her own terms. Her journey was far from over, and the stakes felt higher than ever. Adam's carefully crafted life stood just across the street, an ever-present reminder of the betrayal she endured and the strength she continued to nurture within herself. As night deepened, Madison folded her journal closed and leaned back, the distant sound of children's laughter mingling with the cool breeze through the open window. The choice ahead was hers to make, and for the first time in a long while, hope flickered through the shadows. Days stretched into weeks as Madison grappled with the swirling storm inside her and the unsettling reality unfolding just across the street. Adam's new life seemed to pulse with vibrant energy she'd never shared, a family, a child, a future she had never been part of. The contrast weighed on her, a constant reminder of secrets and silences that had shaped her past 3 years in ways she never imagined. Madison's world had grown smaller in some ways, focused intensely on the house opposite hers, its windows glowing warmly in the evenings, the soft murmurs of domestic life filtering through the thin walls of the neighborhood. She found herself drawn to moments of quiet observation, piecing together fragments of a life that had been deliberately hidden from her. The child's laughter, a melody seemingly designed to fracture the heart, echoed down the street on more than one occasion. Her name, sometimes uttered softly, sometimes with excitement, slipped through open windows, becoming a cruel refrain. Yet, what unsettled Madison most wasn't just the existence of the family but the way Adam maintained a dual life. To the world, he was the charming bachelor, the neighbor with easy smiles and amicable waves on male days. Privately, behind closed doors, he was a father, a partner, a man whose betrayal was no longer secret but crystallized in the clear realities she glimpsed. Tension coiled within Madison like a tightened spring. She wrestled with everything: the deception, the skewed version of their past, the betrayal of trust, and the crushing shame of having been so thoroughly unaware. At the same time, a new question emerged, sharper and more urgent: who was Adam now? Was the man she had loved and mourned the same man who occupied that warm home filled with laughter and innocence? She carried the question quietly, unsure whether to confront the reality or retreat into the fragile peace she'd forged since the wedding day that never was. Her paintings, once a refuge, now reflected the turmoil, dark swirls of blues and grays mingling with streaks of light, a canvas caught between despair and hope. One particularly restless evening, Madison's resolve tipped toward action. She decided she needed to know everything, to face this hidden chapter head-on. Her heart pounded as she stood on her porch, the cool night air wrapping tightly around her like a cloak. The street lay bathed in moonlight, shadows stretching long and uncertain. From a distance, she could see the glow from Adam's living room, a soft pool of light where his silhouette occasionally moved. The woman appeared beside him at times, a gentle smile, hands intertwined, and the child, small and spirited, darted between rooms, her laughter ringing bright and clear. Then, in a moment that sharpened the ache inside Madison's chest, she heard the child call out plainly, "Daddy." The word hung in the air a long moment before fading into the night. There was no mistaking the intimacy and certainty in that voice, no denying the bond it represented. Madison's breath caught, and something within her shifted. The man she thought she knew had been living a secret life, one full of love and responsibility that excluded her entirely. The life they'd been building in their shared dreams had been a figment of her hope, a fragile illusion. With trembling hands, Madison reached for her phone and began to write a message, but the words stopped short, trapped by a complex mix of anger and vulnerability. She was unsure whether to call him, demand answers, or simply turn away and protect the fragile life she had begun to rebuild in his absence. Her eyes flicked again to the house across the street, where the glow from the living room now flickered with movement. She realized, in that instant, that Adam had never planned to return, not to Madison, but not to the life he had once promised. The truth settled like a cold weight, but it also ignited a spark of something fierce and resolute. Madison understood now that the power she had was not in confrontation or revenge, but in reclaiming her worth and autonomy. The narrative that had been written for her, the abandoned fiancé, the woman cast aside, would no longer define her. Earlier that day, Madison had shared a quiet thought with Elise over coffee, a tentative step toward release. Sometimes, she'd said, we have to face the things that hurt the most, not to break us, but so we can be free. Elise reached across the table, her hand warm and steady. You're stronger than you know, Madison. You'll find your way. Madison smiled, a hint of gratitude shining through. The journey ahead was uncertain, but the weight of ignorance had lifted. She had uncovered a truth that changed everything, for better or worse, and now, she was free to decide what came next. As night deepened and the neighborhood sank into quiet, Madison felt a quiet resolve settle within her. The past could no longer control her story, and though the road ahead was fraught with challenges, she was poised to forge a future that was truly her own. Have you ever uncovered a truth that changed everything? The question lingered in the still air, an invitation to reflect on the transformative power of facing realities long concealed. Madison's story, rich with pain, courage, and awakening, was far from over, and the coming moments promised both confrontation and catharsis, a final reckoning that would redefine her path. Madison stood at the threshold of the small house across the street, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear, resolve, and something like hope. The evening air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine from her own garden, mingling with the faint aroma of cooking drifting from inside Adam's home. For years, this house had been a silent barrier between her past and present, a space where secrets lived in quiet shadows. Tonight, she was determined to bring those shadows into the light. The door opened before she could summon the courage to knock. Adam stood there, surprise flickering across his features before he masked it with a polite, if guarded, smile. "Madison," he said hesitantly, his voice a mixture of disbelief and something unreadable beneath the surface. "What are you doing here?" She looked into his eyes, searching for the remnants of the man she had once loved, the man she had trusted with so much. "I needed to see you. I needed to hear the truth," she replied steadily, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Adam glanced over his shoulder, where the sound of a child's laughter echoed through the open window, a small voice calling, "Daddy." The moment hung heavy between them, a silent acknowledgement of the life he'd built without her. "Adam," Madison continued, "for 3 years, I've carried the weight of your absence, the silence, the unanswered questions. I thought I deserved answers, honesty. Not secrets, not a family I didn't know about. You left me, at the altar, and then built a life right here, across the street, without a word." Adam's gaze faltered, guilt and regret flickering through his eyes. "Madison, it's not that simple. There are things you don't understand." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," Madison said, her voice firm now, the hurt hardening into resolve. "And it was your silence that broke me, not just the abandonment. You gave me promises you never intended to keep." Words flooded between them, raw and unfiltered, pained confessions, regrets, and years of withheld truths. Madison felt the heavy burden of betrayal slowly lifting, replaced by a clear sense of power that only comes from speaking her truth. As the conversation unfolded, neighbors began to gather quietly, drawn by the tense exchange, their eyes wide with surprise. The whispers that had once isolated Madison now seemed to turn in her favor, shifting from judgment to empathy. People who had watched her from a distance saw not a woman shattered but one reclaiming her dignity and strength. In the days that followed, Madison found unexpected support from those around her. The very community that had distanced itself began to embrace her courage, recognizing the resilience it took to confront painful truths rather than hide behind silence. Adam's carefully constructed image unraveled in the light of Madison's honesty, exposing a man who had chosen ease over integrity, convenience over commitment. The consequences rippled through the neighborhood, prompting reflection and change. Madison, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding her own life, this time rooted in self-respect and clarity rather than hope tethered to another's uncertainty. She returned to her painting with renewed passion, each canvas a declaration of freedom and rebirth. One afternoon, sitting in the garden that witnessed both her heartbreak and healing, Madison allowed herself a soft smile. The future was no longer a fragile dream but a space she shaped with her own hands, a future defined by truth, courage, and the unshakable knowledge of her own worth. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. See you in our next story.